So, hello everyone. Welcome to Planet Women's Leadership for a Thriving Future. We're so happy that you all could join us. I'm going to first remind everybody to please stay on mute just so we make sure there's no reverb type stuff going on. But first, I'm going to pass it to Charlene Eigen Vasquez, who's going to give us who's going to gather us with a blessing as our opening. So, go ahead, Charlene.
Welcome, everybody. So, I have a bigger part in the program. So right now I'll just say that I'm coming to you from California. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area, in the south part of the Bay Area. I'm a descendant of the Ohlone people. I'm also of Mexican American heritage. So I'm going to welcome you today in the Mutsun language. I tuteu wa'a tete yakmun taktun. Hi tutuue wa'a te ha'a kun takwas. Hi tutuue wa'a tete pa kakawan. Hi tutuue wa'a tete hakni. Hi tutuue wa'a tete min haku ale tu his. Equeme canis amen. Equecat mac amese. Patxe ka hin. Mensu pide. Koka pesio yu ka worka. Ene arwa pahaka. Pan pahaka. Etwekat makamse. Momsem canis. Hitze me was ha'yi. And if you're interested in what I was just saying, the first part was calling in the 4 directions, which is pretty important when you begin a meeting and you're asking for guidance. And I do it in a way that says the wind comes from the west, the wind comes from the south, the wind comes from the east, the wind comes from the north, the wind is in you today. And the second part is just a calling directly to the ancestors. And it's a poem that I created. It's called Dearest, Don't Forget Me, I Will Not Forget You. And the words say, I close my eyes, the world is silent. When I remember, I weep. But your spirit is alive. I am alive. I will not forget all of you. Just tell me, why are you calling me? Because I am ready. And the last piece that I'll share is that the last fluent speaker of the Mutsun language passed in 1933. And if you look at Wikipedia, they actually have the Mutsun language on a list of extinct languages. And so there's a handful of us that are bringing this back. And so I bring it back to you because on this International Women's Day 2023, I want to breathe life into Maria Ascensión Solorzano de Garcia de Cervantes. She is that person that left this legacy of a language, and it was recorded for us to pass on. So thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Charlene. That was lovely. I'm just going to take one moment just to breathe in everything that was just said. Was great. Thank you. Well, hello, everyone, and happy International Women's Day. Woo! Today, we're going to celebrate women's social, economic, cultural, and political achievements across the globe. My name is Shayna Emil. I use she, her pronouns, and I will be your host for today. I'm the board treasurer for Planet Women and also a participant of Planet Women's 100 Women Pathway, which you'll hear more about a little bit later. But first, we want to welcome each and every one of you. There's so much collective wisdom in this group, and each of us brings our own cultures and our lines of ancestors who've informed us and who we are and how we approach leadership. For me, I'm a first generation Haitian American, and everything I do, as well as everything I do in leadership, as well as in my outside personal and professional life, is informed by my experience growing up as a first generation Haitian American, and also with the generational experiences that my family have gone through and have encountered and overcome. And so I'm very excited to hear more about the presenters here and how they approach leadership and how their backgrounds inform the way they approach leadership. So feel free as we go through this, feel free to put questions in the chat. We're going to collect them and we're going to have some time at the end for some questions. So make sure that you're putting questions there. And also, oh, yes. And so we're going to start with a little exercise, more of a chat exercise. So feel free if you would like to put into the chat where you are in the world today and one word that describes how you want to lead. So I'm Shane Emil, like I said, I am in Seattle, Washington currently. And my one word is empathy. That's how I like to lead. I'll give some time for people to put that in. But like I said, make sure that you are putting any questions or even comments that you had in the chat, and we'll keep track of those. Also, there's going to be a short writing prompt, so make sure that you have a pen and paper nearby, or maybe just a Word document open on the side to take some notes. Okay, so a little bit about Planet Women. I think many of you probably know about Planet Women, but we're gonna talk a bit more. Because we are Planet Women, this is International Women's Day. It's kind of our bread and butter, our jam, our jelly, our peanut butter, all the things that go into the sandwich. For nearly 3 years now, Planet Women has partnered with women to celebrate a healthy planet for all life. Planet Women does this in two ways. The first, we invest in on-the-ground partners who are working to protect nature and supporting communities. These communities are in Central Africa, in the Andes, Amazon, and in the US Colorado River Basin. The second way that Planet Women works and partners with women to create a healthy life is to create systemic change by transforming the way leadership looks like in the environmental movement and other movements as well. We work to shift resources and decision-making power to local leaders who are making the most impact, or who are most impacted by the environmental climate, by the environmental crisis, and who have the power to make the most impact and have the experiences that can aid those impacts, the solution to the impacts, solution to the problems. It's a different, we approach it a different way. There is this sort of traditional model of leadership, and we at Planet Women look at different ways of approaching leadership. We do this in two ways. The first is through our 100 Women Pathway, and the second through a regenerative leadership program that we have. Generally, Planet Women's leadership model, it centers women and marginalized communities. We embrace the power, sharing of power, and collaboration, compassion, and balanced scientific knowledge with this intuitive wisdom that many women and people in the world carry that often gets overlooked. Around the world, we see this leadership style embodied by women and people of all genders who are dedicating to protecting nature and supporting communities. We've had, in the last 3 years, Planet Women has had such an amazing experience looking at different leadership models that centers women and marginalized communities. We've talked to many diverse women leaders, and we felt like it was important to highlight and discuss these different types of leadership in a way that could maybe support marginalized groups and give people the tools to try leadership in a different way, a way that centers not only themselves, but centers women and marginalized communities. So we hope that from this you can get some tools to maybe look at leadership differently and approach it in a different way. And I'm going to hand it over to Janet Wen. She is the senior vice president of the 100 Women Pathway at Planet Women, and she's going to talk a bit more about the 100 Women Pathway.
Thank you, Shayna. I appreciate it. And it's so exciting to see so many of our supporters, women from from the pathway, from the regenerative leadership program, our partners, board members, so many supporters, someone from Scotland, someone from the Philippines. I am impressed, since we know that it's very time-wise, it's late for you all. So thank you and welcome. As Shayna said, I manage the 100 Women Pathway, and it really was created by women, for women, to identify and elevate women, especially women of color, to higher levels of leadership within the environmental movement. At Planet Women, we believe that including women in the challenges that Mother Earth is facing is the only way to improve environmental outcomes and create lasting impact for our planet. One of the foundational elements of the pathway is our personal journey. Each of us has our own personal journey, shaped by our life experiences and influenced by people and systems around us, including our families, our relationships, our culture, our work, and the systems that we live within and sometimes fight. We must understand how those around us influence our thoughts and our beliefs about our role as leaders. For many of us, that journey includes recognizing and healing from past trauma. And that certainly has been true for me. And ultimately, this journey of self-discovery leads women to the realization that some of our long-held beliefs are untrue. And we discover a power and a purpose that we didn't know that we had. Through this introspective work, women begin to recognize that how you perceive yourself is different from how you're perceived by others. Because I've seen again and again that women tend to judge themselves harshly. Every 100 Women Pathway participant has been nominated by a woman CEO. And it's powerful to realize that a CEO sees you as someone who can lead at the highest levels of leadership. Women around you see your gifts and what you bring to the world in a way you can't see yourself. They're the mirror that isn't distorted. To have yourself reflected back to you in a way that's absent of judgment is very enlightening. They can get to a place where they feel their own power and start to believe that they are ready to lead in a way that they never believed before. My hope is that every person is able to get their gifts reflected back to them. The other main element of the pathway is building community around women leaders. And meeting so many women in my role has only emphasized for me that there's such a need for this sense of community. They don't know that they need it or how important it is as they face barriers, as women and women of color. Women aren't used to asking for help. Often women at the highest levels of leadership are used to being alone. They are often the only woman in senior leadership, and even more often, the only woman of color. The real sense of support that comes with these connections can be uplifting and transformative. So I welcome all of you to our community here today as we celebrate International Women's Day. I'm so pleased to be able to welcome our next speaker, who opened our session for us, Charlene Egan-Vasquez, who is part of our 100 Women Pathway, as well as part of our regenerative leadership program. Thank you for being here, Charlene.
Thank you, Janet. And thank you everybody for, caring enough just to be here. One of the things that, I've learned about and thought about through Planet Women and my participation is the need to invest in yourself. And to me, this is you investing in yourself. You're learning today. There'll be a little bit of a cultural exchange. And it's huge, and it's important to all of us in the work that we do to know that so many people care. So again, my name is Charlene Egan-Vasquez. I am a mother, I'm a grandmother, I'm a sister, I'm a tia, I'm an auntie. I've been called by others an activist. I'm sometimes an artist. I'm also a professor, whatever that means, right? I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a dreamer, and yes, also a troublemaker. And probably that's the biggest thing that people think about when they think about Charlene. Oh no, here comes trouble, right? Trouble in a good way, I hope. Today I lead the Healing and Reconciliation Institute. And before I go any further, it's really important for me to say, as I think about like this journey that I'll share with you, it's really important for me to introduce you to probably one of my main teachers. And her name is Miss Anne-Marie Sayers. She's an Ohlone elder, and the first person that pretty much threw me into this kind of leadership role, take charge role, because believe it or not, I'm actually a super introvert, and you could never get me to speak in the public, probably until I was like 30 years old or something like that. So yeah, she really pushed me in that way and made me realize that, you know, the things that are happening in this world are really important, and you just need to talk about it. And I'll speak more to that later, but we have just a movie trailer. There's actually a whole movie, and you can get that information later if you're interested, but this is a trailer to a documentary.
My name is Anne-Marie Sayers. I live in Indian Canyon in Hollister, California, and it is the only federally recognized Indian country for 350 miles along coastal California. This is Ohlone territory, which extends from San Francisco to Big Sur, from the Pacific Ocean to the Mount Diablo Range. It was not until 1980 that I realized the American Indian did not get the right to practice their religion freely until 1978 with the American Indian Religious Freedom Act. I was horribly upset, and so I opened up my great-grandfather's trust allotment to all indigenous people whom are in need of traditional lands for ceremony. California, indeed, is a golden state. Reality dictates that the foundation of California, foundation of this entire country, is built on lives and deaths of Indians. I will tell you, my ancestors lived here for 16,000 years. And it's at a point now that our mother is having difficulty. Non-Native people can learn a lot from the Native peoples that are still alive, that are still living on their lands, that are working with the environment in a manner that is respectful. I would really enjoy the current administration to live on a reservation, and perhaps they would understand what they are creating and what they have created, and understand the beauty of natural life. Let's protect it. I love being alive today and seeing all the Native peoples really embrace their culture.
So in our notes later, we can share the link to the documentary if anybody's interested in watching it. So what was my path to leadership? You know, if you read anything, or if you want to look me up on LinkedIn, go ahead. But it really doesn't matter, because none of that matters. It was not my formal education. It's not the corporations that I worked for. It really began with, you know, the teachings from Miss Anne-Marie, you know, reconnecting with place, right? So you saw in there a picture of Indian Canyon. So I've been there many times to ceremony and just reconnecting with place. And when you connect with a place, then you know when that place is hurting. You know when things have changed, and you know when you need to take action. And so that was really important at the time. But I will say though, also, she didn't ask me when we started our relationship together. She didn't ask me about my education. She didn't ask me about my history. She didn't ask me about my family. I just came again and again to that location. And without asking me any of that, oh, she pretty much thrust me into the public eye, right? We were advocating for saving sacred sites and for some cultural protections of cultural things. And the first meeting that I went to was in the city of San Francisco, where some remains had been found. And in addition to that, they were kind of fighting for a Native American cultural center, which, by the way, still has not happened in that way. That whole discussion was taking place in the 80s. So it takes a long time to create this change, and it takes a lot of patience. And I think that one of the things that I can think about is, you never say never and you never give up. And you know that the things that you do today, you might not actually see them until we'll say, in the spirit world, right? But that doesn't mean you give up. So that's kind of what I learned. That's kind of my foundation. But then things really started to change when she invited me to be part of a ceremony to rebury Ohlone ancestors. I didn't know exactly what that meant until, honestly, I showed up. And a lot of things that happen in Native American culture is there's not a lot of explanation. It's a lot about listening and watching, listening and watching, listening and watching. And before you know it, then you start to get it right. So she invited me to come and be part of the reburial of some Ohlone ancestors. Now, these ancestors were unearthed when Stanford University was expanding their parking lot. And fortunately and unfortunately, right, they had been part of a number of reburials. But the fortunate part is that they had enough contacts and they were wise enough to stop what they were doing in order to make sure that those ancestral remains and cultural items were handled with respect and treated properly. So my role in this reburial was to actually hold these bundles, carry these bundles that were newly wrapped with the items that came through them, in them, and to carry them, walk them into a mass grave, essentially. And so there were maybe a dozen of us that one by one, we carried these back, and they were properly covered and put into a place where, a private place that supposedly will never be unearthed and will be protected into perpetuity, but you think about it, like when you bury your own ancestors, your mother, your father, your grandfather, whoever it is, like you put them at a grave site and you expect that nobody's going to touch them, right? Well, so we hope and pray that they'll never be disturbed again. What I will say though, that was again back in the 80s, but that process doesn't stop, and it's heartbreaking. So for example, in 2011, Safeway, a local grocery store chain, they were planning on building a 58,000 square foot grocery store in Pleasanton, California. And during the process, again, in this case, hundreds of remains were found, and it halted the construction of this particular site. The challenge and part of the heartbreak, though, is that at the time, again, this is 2011, not that long ago, people were convinced that the Ohlone people didn't even exist. So if the Ohlone people don't exist, then that means we can hire a cultural resource management firm to take care of the matter. And that's what happened there. They hired an outside entity to manage how the cultural remains, how our ancestors would be cared for. And the sad part of it is that 20 years prior to the building of that particular grocery store, they say that over 470 Ohlone remains were found in the area. So why isn't it that when that happened in the 90s, that they didn't do some more research to figure out who the people were? Like, it's just preposterous. So that's kind of like the beginning of my call to do some of the work that I do. So imagine that. And here's just another kind of example of things that happen. So, those are obvious, like you're finding human bones, you're finding cultural items, and you say, okay, well, that's a problem. That shouldn't happen. You probably shouldn't move them. You probably should find the right people, the descendants of those people, and figure out what to do. Now let's fast forward to 2022. So in 2022 in West Berkeley, just across the bay from San Francisco, you have the Berkeley Shell Mound. And so if you're in the United States, you might hear about the struggle to protect the shell mounds. And people say, well, what's the big deal, right? A heap of shells. But what they don't realize sometimes is that this heap of shells and earth contain actually organic matter that was built up over thousands of years. But they also use those mounds, again, to bury our ancestors and to store ceremonial items because they're important part of the burial ceremony. So if you ever hear about these shell mounds, again, these are sacred sites, not just a mound of shells. And the fight to protect them is, long, and it's hard. And I would say in the case of Berkeley, they're making strides to protect some of the area, but it's not enough. The biggest fight there in Berkeley is that the shell mound that's being protected is really one of the oldest archaeological sites or structures of its kind in the entire Bay Area. And at one point, there was going to be a parking lot built on top of it. It's just this misunderstanding. And sometimes, it's not a misunderstanding at all. Sometimes it has to do with politics. Sometimes it has to do with the economy, right? But for lots of reasons, it's easier to say that people are extinct. It's easier to say this language is gone. It's easier to say that there really isn't a long-lasting culture, because then, as you know, Earth gets destroyed. So what do you do in these situations? As I'm living and learning, and by the way, I have my own regular full-time job, and I'm reading these stories and getting called in to speak at public events or in front of city councils or boards of supervisors. It's exhausting. So the first thing that I did was kind of break one of our founding rules that we grew up with. And that rule is sacred is secret. And sacred is secret was created and as spoken and has been spoken over generations by Indigenous people. And it really is derived because there were actual threats to the lives and the culture of Native American people. So if you've done any studies around Indigenous history, then you know what that is all about. And if you probably noticed that Miss Anne Marie, she alludes to it in her video also. And she talks a little bit about how important it was to open up her land, right? Her family land for people. So Sacred and Secret actually forced some Indigenous people to come out into the open and declare who they were, and to actually even share ceremony with other people. So they understand the importance of it. They understand that ceremony is just part of this holistic life that we lead. In some families, you can imagine, though, that this actually breaks the rules told to us by our own grandparents, our own parents, right? When they grew up, to identify an Indigenous person could mean definitely racism. If it was my parent, if it was my grandmother, for example, it could have meant her life. Because I live in an area that was taken over by during the gold rush, and the area is really profitable. The real estate is really valuable. And Indigenous people here at the time were just in the way. So the first thing that I did when I realized I needed to do something was organize the Confederation of Ohlone people. And the Confederation of Ohlone people is just an opportunity to speak to and organize what would be over 50 known villages and tribes in the area, so that we all have one voice. The second part is I began to teach ethnic studies, thinking maybe that's the answer. So I taught Native American, Chicano, African American, and Asian American studies in the state of Minnesota to people who weren't necessarily interested in ethnic studies. And I will say the courses were really good. The student interaction was really good, but it still wasn't enough. So I returned to law school and finished that around the age of 50, I will say, thinking that a few more tools in my tool belt would be helpful. Now, I never did that in order to go into a courtroom and litigate, but I did do it because I wanted skills around peacemaking and mediation in Indian law that might be helpful. So that's kind of how I got on that path of leadership. It wasn't like an intentional thing. It was step by step, inch by inch, being encouraged by others, including the ancestors, to do this. And then I arrived here at Planet Women. And the one thing I'll talk about is just a little bit about, as you know, I participated in the 100 Women Pathway. And so that's an 8-month program, an investment in yourself if you have the opportunity to go through the 100 Women Pathway. But then I also did the Regenerative Leadership Program. And now that's a 9-week program of collective growth, where, as one of my mentors says, Liza, the leader of that program, will re-educate the educated. And what I mean by that is sometimes we have to go back. Sometimes we have to remember who we are, remember exactly why we're doing what we're doing. And remember that there's probably a higher calling for all of it that we do. And if that's our focus, just remembering, and reaching way back and calling around all those people that brought you up, then you'll also know that purpose, all those teachings can be used for a higher purpose. So with that, I will go ahead and stop, but I'm so happy to be here. And, if anybody has any questions, just let me know. But I'm really grateful to Planet Women for all that they've done to bring up new leaders.
Thank you, Charlene. I second that. I feel so much like I mentioned at the beginning that everything in our past informs our future. And so it's very important for me to look towards my family and how they've grown and the challenges they've gone through to inform how I approach things. So thank you again so much. I'm going to pass it on to our next speaker, Carmera Thomas Wilhite. Go ahead, Carmera.
Thank you. I am going to share my slides. 1 second. Is everyone seeing? Oh, no? Try again. How about now? Yes?
Yes, we can see you now.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here. My name is Carmera Thomas Wilhite. I am a Marylander and a teacher, a nature enthusiast, and a very strong Black woman. I work in conservation and the environmental movement on a focus on people-centered collaboration and equity. I want to share a little bit about my personal journey that was encouraged by many women leaders in my life and who have advocated for my success. Their love and support has led me to this place in my career. So I have to start with my granny. I spent summers with my granny and mostly in nature around her house in Annapolis. And I would spend most of my days outside in her garden, planting vegetables, learning how to swim at the local pool, and testing my skills in the bay, and really forming strong bonds with my cousins. My granny was once a civics teacher who retired in the community, and she was stern, but she was and strong and very opinionated. But she was also so kind and loving and taught me many life lessons. She's in this picture in the red dress next to my grandfather, who also was extremely inspiring, but also very strict with us as when we were little, but taught me how to color in the lines when I was learning how to write, and taught me how to write my own name before I went to school. So I was ahead of the game before many preschoolers. And my mom, who took me on my first adventures to Luray Caverns in Virginia and pushed me to really work hard and never to expect anything less than what I deserved. And I always loved being outside. These are my cousins. Me as a little girl in little purple pink shirt, and my cousin, we're 2 years apart, but we're almost like sisters. This is us. Anytime we could go outside, we did. And this is us now as adults. There are 6 of us. We call ourselves the Unbreakable Six. And because of our time spent in nature at our granny's house, we have a really strong bond. And fun fact, we all have the same scar from hopping over a fence together to go to a playground. And we each have the same scar on our foot, which is really funny. But we always had a really good time and just enjoyed learning and loving nature. And my grandfather, who taught economics and was an extension agent and helped a lot of farmers around Anne Arundel County in Maryland, taught us a lot because he was a teacher in 4-H. And then most of my teachers throughout my school age were very strong women, especially my high school biology teacher, who really helped me excel. She never let me give up, even when I thought all the details of cells and ecosystems were hard to remember. And she encouraged me to study biology in college, which I wasn't too thrilled about. I thought it was too hard and said, oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm thinking about doing this. And initially I didn't tell her, but I studied psychology. But one of my professors, another wonderful woman, and the department chair of the biology department, she challenged me and she said, I know you can do this. You can study biology. Half the people after Bio 101 dropped it because they couldn't understand the second half, but I stuck with it and I graduated with honors in my major and I earned many scholarships, and Dr. Kosel was an amazing professional and a wife and a mother. When I graduated, I had no idea what my career in conservation would look like. I could have chosen so many paths. I studied biology and psychology, so I could have gone into healthcare and everything else. But my early experiences in nature really had a positive and profound impression on me. And when I moved back home to Maryland, I stumbled upon an internship program, and it was my first job at an environmental organization. And I was really excited about it. I was around people who cared about the same things that I cared about, who liked to experience the same things. And I had really great experiences. I learned and I soaked in a lot of restoration and history about the Chesapeake Bay. And I really appreciated my grandfather's knowledge, that he taught me, and his legacy was really important to me and how I showed up in my work. But I realized that most of the time I was working with young people or people that looked like me, but the organization that I worked in did not. So that was kind of a challenge for me. But again, my granny, she was there and encouraged me. And she said, do everything, try it all. And it doesn't matter what other people think, and it doesn't matter what other people say. So for the past 6 years, I've worked in the conservation field, and my priorities really have shifted to think about not only the environmental impacts, but how our environment impacts us and how we impact the environment, and thinking about prioritizing people and communities. I haven't always felt like I belonged in this space, but the more I learned about environmental issues, I learned that there is a disconnect in some of the conservation field around people and the environment, and that we need really strong leaders, especially women and communities of color. because addressing environmental injustice is a process. And there is a goal to achieve equal access and the same level of protection for healthy environment to live and to learn and to work. And most outdoor spaces have lacked that meaningful engagement and the investment in those communities. But including myself, we're change makers and we're mentors that are dedicated to saving our planet and to make this a part of our life's work. Environmental issues are inseparable from our experiences, and it's really important to have those positive experiences in nature and the outdoors, but also building trusting relationships, sharing stories, listening to perspectives, having historic knowledge, and really just thinking about reducing barriers and access to solve our solutions. Because our personal experiences and awareness of ourself encourages us and engages us, and it really helps us understand our why and why we're here to protect and restore it. And I'm so grateful for my positive experiences because I've been just motivated to work with people who look like me to shift the narrative, but also enjoy nature and protect the earth and fight for climate change solutions. I'm thankful for my friends and family who you can see in this picture, my husband who's always there for a camping adventure, even though he went camping for the first time with me, my family that I met through Soul Track Outdoors, a really awesome DC-based organization, and my girls who I go hiking with, my hiking crew, and of course myself, because if it weren't for me having confidence in myself, I wouldn't be here where I am. I'm also really thankful and grateful for my experience in the 100 Women Pathway. Janet and many other mentors really empowered me and just helped me just land my dream job. I learned so much about myself, and I'm forever grateful for her particularly, and for the hard push and honest feedback. And now I'm part of the network as an alumni leader, and I will continue to learn from the wonderful women in my life who make a difference. It's not lost on me that we are at the forefront of the environmental movement. And as a member of this cohort, I want to honor them and learn and be among the amazing thought leaders and change makers, because the women who we are and the needs that we care for, we're leading with truth and courage to save our planet. And I'm so honored to be among them. Thank you.
Thank you, Carmera. That was lovely. I love to see pictures of people, young and old, and see how they progressed. It's just so. Thank you so much. Next, we're gonna pass it to Kathleen Finlay, who's going to direct us all in an activity. So remember when I talked about the notepads or the document? Now it's time to break it out. So go ahead, Kathleen.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Shayna. Can you all hear me all right? Thumbs up. Great. Yeah, a little bit about me and the work that we're going to do. So I do a couple of different things. I run a nonprofit that works on regional food systems in the Hudson Valley. And I also started many years ago an organization called the Pleiades Network, which is a national constellation of women who lead efforts to address social and environmental issues. And what I'm going to share with you today is really drawn on the work and the experience I've had with Pleiades. More personally, on International Women's Day, I want to just recognize my Bermudian mother. I'm Bermudian American, and just want to give her a shout out and say Happy International Women's Day to all of you. So my role here today is to really introduce you to a tool. And we're going to work with this tool a little bit, but you're going to leave, I hope, with something really practical and pragmatic that you can use to hone your own leadership and the skills and talents and energy and passion of those you lead. And it's a tool that I've used many times, and we use it in the Pathway program with Planet Women. So some of the folks on this call have experienced it. And yeah, we're just going to play around with it a little bit. The essence of the tool is to resource. Typically, I work with women to help them achieve the work that they are called to do. So one of the hallmarks, I think, of this new paradigm of leadership, it was a wonderful quote by Ayana on the last slide, is a more collaborative approach that doesn't shy away from asking for help, that doesn't shy away from generous spirits that resource others to achieve their dreams and their goals in order to make the world a better place. So in its essence, the tool is collaborative, generous, heart forward, loving, kind. And that's the kind of values that we want to foster. I think all of us would agree we want to foster in the future. The tool centers around what you were going to play with today is articulating a need. And then how it manifests if we had more time or if we were in a smaller group or in person would be that we would each take a turn articulating our need. And then we would spend some time facilitating how to resource that need in a very direct way. And so the person who shares their need walks away with really tangible resources. And I'll sort of explain that. We're going to work on the need piece today, because in my experience, having used this tool with groups all over the world, for women, it can often be challenging to articulate a need, a tangible, specific need. And I think I'm not a sociologist or an anthropologist, but my hunch is that culturally we're given lots of signals that say to us that we are need givers, we are providers, we are helpers, and we shy away from saying, I actually need something and I need to ask you to help me get that need met. And so when we do this work, I spend a lot of the time working on the need part. The generous resourcing from the other women in the group comes pretty readily. So I just wanted to, I think it's interesting to think about why I think this tool is so effective is because I think it is the power of articulating and knowing your need. So what I hope you all walk away with today is one or two or even three very tangible needs that you then have, and you can go out and ask for help in getting those needs met. So that's what we're going to work on. So when I describe a need, and even the resourcing, the more specific the need is, the better. So let me just give you some examples. Sometimes when I do this work, someone will say something like, living in the city has become really expensive. I need to make more money. And it's like, okay, that's a big need, but it's hard to resource that need, right? It was like, you got to break it down into how could you make more money? What do you want to, do you want to move? Do you want to find a different job? As opposed to, for example, I need a VP level job at a large environmental organization so I can stay in my city. So that need, I'm like, well, I know large environmental organizations in your city. Maybe I can think about who I know that might be looking for a VP. So one tenet of a really strong articulation of a need is that it's resourceable. It's very specific. I need to get my work out there more. It's another thing I hear. So trying to break that down to, I would like my work to be displayed at a museum if you're an artist. I would like my movie to be distributed on Netflix. I would like my work to be described by a national newspaper article. Those are things that we can work with. When we do the facilitation in person, when we do the full resourcing, so we're kind of going to do the articulation of the need today. Then we have a section of time where the participants can ask clarifying questions. These are yes or no questions. Do you want to stay in your city? Yes. Do you, any yes or no question really. And then the third part is the resourcing. So we're not going to do the resourcing today, but I will say that the same rules apply. The resourcing should be very actionable and tangible, so that when we're doing the resourcing, advice is not welcome. It's not an advisory situation. It's not, have you ever thought about, or maybe you should. It is, I know the person on a board at the museum, and I'm going to introduce you to them and ask if they'll spend 10 minutes talking about your work. That's a resource. I'm going to look at the list of environmental organizations that you want to work with and see if I know anybody so that I can make an introduction for you. So a little bit of advice for that you shouldn't give for when you do that work. And I'm happy to, this type of facilitation we call I Need, I Can. And I'm happy to contact me. I'll walk you through it so that then you can use it with your team. You can use it with your networks. It's just a very powerful, powerful way to get needs met quickly, efficiently, and kind of beautifully. So right now, with your piece of paper and your pen, what I'd like to do is just spend a few minutes trying to articulate probably one, if need, try to make it tangible, actionable, specific. And if you for it, you can pop that need into the chat. So then that's an expression of your need, and we'll all know that need. And if we can help you in the future get that need met, then we might be able to contact you and we can look at a few of them, and I'll just kind of talk about them and how I would work with them if we were doing a live session. Does that make sense? So why don't we spend, I don't know how we're doing on time here, Shayna. Let's see. We have a few minutes. Let's spend 3 minutes. Does that sound good? 3 to 4 minutes articulating a couple of needs. Great.
I see a couple needs reflected in the chat. And so I guess maybe we can give people one more minute or so. That sounds
Great.
good.
Yeah. Feel free to put them in the chat. It's probably a really good opportunity because I bet some of those needs are going to get met. It's my hunch. So please continue to add them. I'm just going to make a few observations. These are so great. And I believe that we're capturing all these needs beyond the chat so that we'll have a document of them. And I don't know if I think we'll share them back out with the participants because I'm already itching to resource a lot of these needs. And you see that the ones that are really, really direct and tangible, where was that first one? I need a director or managerial level job in a conservation organization in Belize. One, I just facilitated a group of women, and one need was like, I need an academic proofreader. I guess there's a whole sector of academia proofreaders that I wasn't quite clear on, but I mean, she got resourced in like 2 seconds, we were done. It's just like so tangible. But I don't know about you, but until I started doing this work, I didn't have circles to go to where I could just feel comfortable saying, here's my need, can you help me? You know, sometimes when I'm eavesdropping on more male forward networks, I hear, oh, I got a guy. I know someone who could do that. And that answer is because someone asked someone they need help filing their taxes or whatever it is. And so that's the kind of, I think, really powerful opportunity that we can employ to build success in the work that all of us are trying to accomplish. Some of them, if we were doing a live session, I would drill down, like I was saying before, and some of that might be like reaching a wider audience of change makers who will take part in our Leading for Good program. You know, the clarifying questions would be, what's the ideal audience member? Is there a geographic boundary with that? What does more mean to you? Do you want to double your scale and scope or triple it? So those would be some of the clarifying questions that just make the resourcers able to resource you. So if I would encourage those folks where it's still, if you're going to contact someone, if it's still a little kind of big picture, to try, and that's why you can do 1 or 2 or even 3 specific needs that would build up to a larger need. So you can break it down. So what I'm going to ask you to do now, these are so great. I mean, they're so great. I wish we were sitting in a circle and I could just harvest all the resources that I know are in here. So I don't know our wonderful organizers at Planet Women, but maybe there's even a Google Doc situation where folks can start to populate some ideas they have on resourcing, because they're really, there's some needs here that I think would be fantastic if we could all help with them. So while you're still thinking of your need, quickly jot down beyond this group a few people that you know you could share this need with, and there's a good chance they could resource you. So I'm going to give you 1 minute because I want all of you to have this and leave with it. Mm. I was just reading some of the needs. So does everybody, was everybody able to think of some folks that can resource your need? Oh, thumbs up. Great. I think that I just will leave it there, Sheena. And what I will think about how we can use these needs specifically, but this pretty simple practice, I hope, does a few things. I hope it helps you feel more comfortable articulating and asking to get your needs met. And you see what joy it brings, right? Because if you're anything like me, you wanted to start resourcing that's joyful work, that's loving work. And so that act of hey, I have this thing that I really need, can you help me? That exchange becomes really, really powerful. I've just seen incredibly powerful things come from just the beginning of getting a need resourced. So again, I encourage you to figure out how to get the needs that you articulated today met within your own networks. And then I also encourage you to just embrace this culture of need asking and need resourcing. And if anyone wants to facilitate this kind of exercise with a group of friends, I've done it with 3 women around my kitchen table, and I've done it in rooms of hundreds of women in like a sort of fast-paced way. So you can use it with your teams, your friends, your families, any group that you feel like comfortable enough to articulate your need. And chances are you'll get it met, because if we don't say it, then we can't manifest it. It's like Charlene's story was a wonderful example of manifestation. Okay, Shana, back to you. Happy to answer questions in the Q&A.
Thank you, Kathleen. Yes, that was great. I have had the privilege of doing this in person, and it is amazing. And I do also encourage folks to do that within your own circles. And I find myself being like, okay, Belize, who do I know in Belize? So I think part of my family experience is not asking for help. And so I know how sometimes our past can actually hurt us in their present. And I find it very therapeutic to say, no, I do need help, because people need people as much as you think that you may not need people. You need people. So thank you for that. So I'm going to take some time to see if we have any questions. I see there's one question from Marikar in the chat for Kathleen specifically. So I'll just, Marikar, do you want to come off mute and ask it?
Yeah, Kathleen, I was wondering if you'd be available to, facilitate with groups. I have some ideas, but if you are, I can just contact you.
Absolutely. And the organization that I mentioned, Pleiades, if any, if folks want to know more about that, they should contact me also. But one of the offerings Pleiades does is that you can engage us to facilitate. So it could be me, or some of the other leadership is really well trained in that kind of facilitation. So that's the capacity that we work with Planet Women with, was through Pleiades, and we're doing more and more of that. And I personally love doing it because it's so nourishing. So yeah, hit me up for sure.
And we will be sure to send up a follow-up email with links to all of these things. But for now, I'll just put a little bit about Pleiades in the chat. Nope, I didn't put it in the right chat. I will send it to the chat now. We've got another question as well. From Juliana. Would you like to come off mute and ask the question? If not, you can always just pass it to me. Got it. I'll take it over. I got you. So her question is, if I want to learn how to facilitate meetings back in the Amazon, is there a book or another resource you recommend?
Maybe I need to write a book. Christine's been saying that forever. There's not a book, but I have some resources that could help you. And again, I'm just totally available to just walk through it. It is, I find I get better and better and better at the facilitation, and can really work with folks who have a hard time articulating needs, but it's still worth doing, even with just a little bit of instruction. I don't know if any of the folks who have done it through the Pathway program have done the I Need, I Can, have then tried to do it on their own, if they want to share what that's been like. But you can definitely do this in the Amazon.
I'm going to take a little time to see if anybody else has any questions, because we've got at least 10-15 more minutes of time saved for questions, but I'm going to just ask a question while you all simmer a bit. I noticed Charlene and Carmera, you both mentioned falling into or stumbling into leadership. And most people, when you think of leadership, you think someone just like grabbing the reins and taking hold and being a leader. But I find that that's not necessarily my personality. And I have also sort of fallen into leadership begrudgingly or happily, either way. And so I'm wondering if you have any advice on how somebody, especially somebody who was maybe earlier in their career, might seek these leadership opportunities, or who doesn't really know what they want to do, is to get that mentorship and to sort of figure out what they want to do and what kind of leader they want to be.
I can go first. I will say that early in my career, for somebody that's seeking early in my career, it was offered to me, but I would suggest that somebody do this for themselves. But it was offered to me to have a mentor in the organization that I was working with. And the mentor was not in my department or division, had nothing to do with my job. So that was kind of a safe place, and was probably 3 levels higher than I was. And so he was really, really good in terms of telling me, sometimes telling me what to do, because I was like really timid about changing jobs or anything else. And the big, bold thing that he ultimately convinced me to do was actually to leave my job, even though we worked for the same company. and told me that, you're not going to get that higher position. You're not going to get the pay you deserve until you leave. And then if you love the company enough, you can come back and they probably will rehire you at what you deserve, but maybe stepping out for just a little bit. So just thinking about, I also wouldn't be shy about LinkedIn. I haven't, I know a few people on LinkedIn, but it's kind of one of those things where they intend for you to connect with other people. So connect with somebody that, you're kind of looking at their profile and thinking maybe that's something you'd like to do. I've had a number of conversations with strangers that I trust because I'm peeping in and trying to figure out who they are and making sure that they're real people. But just listening to what they're doing and providing them just with some, kind of backstory and experience that I can share.
Well, it's so funny because Charlene mentioned that example of leaving your organization and coming back. The organization that I work for now, Chesapeake Bay Foundation, this is my third time being at this organization. I left and came back and left and came back. And every time that I have come back, I have earned more. I have been in different positions, in leadership positions. I will say that I am, unlike Charlene, I'm extrovert, so I will walk up and talk to anyone. And I had opportunities to go to different conferences, and even though I was probably the youngest person in the room, sometimes I still would walk up to someone and say, "Hey, I would just introduce myself. I am here. I am doing this work. This is what I'm doing." I also mentioned that my mother and my grandmother, were a part of their community and leaders in their community. I will say I've leaned on them for introductions as well, to introduce me to people or to use their network. So using people that and having them introduce you to people. My second cousin, my mother's cousin, introduced me to a woman who is an executive and focusing on equity and diversity at her organization at in the corporate space. So I spoke to her and had conversations with her about her job and her role and how she does, this work, at her organization and her company. So it's just really just having those people in your life that you can talk to and ask them to introduce you. I mean, I love Kathleen's exercise because I need, to be introduced to people sometimes. And it's just really important. So reach out to the people you know, and they'll introduce you to people that they know.
Thank you. Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is that you need to reach out to people and ask for help and use the resources that you have. Again, it's something that I struggle with. Nora put some wonderful quotes that I wanted to highlight in the chat. Re-educate the educated, stepping out for a little bit to get what you deserved. I love that. And it's definitely highlighted by both what Charlene and Kamara just said. Step away and figure out people. What is the quote? People, absence makes the heart grow fonder, something like that. I think with work, that is often the case. People aren't really appreciated until they leave and you recognize how much you're needed. And another quote from Carmera's granny, do everything, try it all. Don't worry about what other people think. I love that. I love that. Wonderful. Anybody else have any questions for our lovely panelists or maybe for our Planet Women staff who are on the call? Or maybe to share any other tidbits of wisdom.
I'll ask a question, or actually not a question, I'll just make a comment.
Great.
My name is Nora McDowell. I'm the project manager for the Fort Mojave Indian Tribe. I was a former chairwoman for my tribe for over 25 years. And I'm just glad I joined today's conference. And I almost thought I wasn't going to be able to do it, but as you all have said here so eloquently, is that you have to make that time for yourself and for your self-development and for everything, that we do. Sometimes our time is just so crunched and we're just trying to fill it and put so many things, into a day, that you don't even have that time for yourself. So anyway, I'm just glad, and I was inspired by hearing all the speakers today. And Charlene, that's part of the work that I've done throughout my whole life, is dealing with cultural sites and cultural resources, and repatriations, discoveries of human remains, all that, so I can be a resource for that, for anybody else needing any kind of advice regarding that. Then I also am doing a lot with water. The Colorado River shortage is just, since me and one of my other colleagues here pretty much have become like the spokesperson on the river now. We're just bombarded. I don't even have time anymore. It just seems like I got more and more requests, for interviews, because people want to know, what they can do to help, and, to try to make the things that are in law, different, because 100 years ago, when this compact was put in place, over the last 100 years, we've mismanaged, we've changed, we've altered the river. We've, done a lot of things to dammed it up. We've done so much to hurt our environment and not leave it in its natural state, the natural order, how the Creator gave us the lands and the water and the things that we have here, just to make it easier on the people that were here, instead of trying to live in harmony and coexistence, what the natural world is. And so anyway, I do that as well. But I just wanted to thank all of you and Planet Women for continuing to inspire me, and all of you young people that are on here today that hopefully, from the same experience. I did do the needs assessment, and they did give me a lot of resources also. My fault is that I just didn't have the time to follow up, except for a couple of them. And they were very helpful to me. So hopefully out of this exercise, we can come together, and if you can send us the list of all the items on here. I didn't have time to, I guess I can save it too. But I know there's some people up in British Columbia that I know that are tribal, that we could probably find the raft that one of the ladies was asking about earlier. So looking forward to helping, but I just wanted to thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you, Nora. And yeah, I also want to invite, if anybody has any comments, please share. What you mentioned, another question that has just been posed in the chat is about rest. I think when we were doing the ICANN, the only thing I could think of is, what do I need to, that was my number one, is rest. And I think we prioritize rest as though it's not so important, but it is. It helps us to keep going, and it helps us create. So how do the panelists rest, and how do you prioritize your well-being? I'll leave it to Kathleen, Carmera, Charlene, either anybody who wants to answer, or other Planet Women people who want to answer as well.
I'll start. Rest is really important for me. I am, not only a department of one, but also thinking about a very hard topic, to think about equity and also my own life experiences. So I work pretty much Monday through Friday, but on Friday, I'm like, shut my laptop till Monday kind of person. I spend a lot of time outside. As you can see, I love hiking. I love going camping. I love just I'll just sit outside sometimes on my balcony and just listen to the birds or listen to the traffic that's driving by, just to be, in that space to calm my brain. And also this rest for me is watching reality TV. That's how I shut my brain off sometimes. So reality TV.
I can go next. And one of the things that I would say right off the bat is, like, figure out what is rest to you. So if it's reality TV, like, own it, do it, be there. Is really important, and not for, don't let other people judge or try to influence you and say, well, why don't you take a nap, or whatever it is, like, do what you want to do, what's best for you. So I create things. So I do two things. One thing is ceremony. it's sometimes hard to get to ceremony, but it's super important. But whatever your ceremony is, right? Whatever it is that connects you to earth, to spirit, whatever like is in your life, to me, that's rest and rejuvenation. But the other thing is just, I'm also an artist. So people say, how do you have time for that? You know, whether I'm sewing or I'm crocheting or I'm painting, or I do a bunch of stuff and I create all kinds of things. But to me, that's, I could do it in my sleep. And so I make these things, and it's like meditation to me. So that to me is rest, and relaxation.
I'll comment, and I admit wholeheartedly that I am terrible at this. Terrible in my work, my professional life, as well as being a mom to 3 teenage girls. There's a lot of drama in my house. So, reality is, moms and women put themselves last, right? And that's been my MO, that's been my life. I run myself ragged until I fall over. And so I really have been very proactive these days about making the time. And I do this thing at the beginning of the week. And at Planet Women, we have no meeting Mondays, which is a really helpful way to get started with the week. Being able to spend time, I call it my P&P, my prep and planning time. First thing Monday morning, I block time and I sit and I think, what are my priorities? If I get through this day, what are the top things, 1 or 2 things, right? Because sometimes I'm rushing around so much, I don't get the top things done, right? That whole push and pull of what's urgent and what's important. Everything seems urgent, right? My email box is jumping out at me and I'm so anxious and I want to get to it. But the reality is that slowing down for me has helped me really speed up and really feel like I have accomplished what my priority was that day or that week. And this is coming from someone who is a workaholic. I'm known by my friends as Energizer Bunny. And I have come to realize that as I've gotten older, I really have to take care of myself. I also go to yoga. I tell my girls, I'm going to yoga. I text them, I'm in yoga. I have a daughter in college. I text the family group chat, I'm in yoga for the next hour. And they know what that means. That is my sacred time. Do not bother me. I'm not going to answer my phone. Call your father. So it's really drawing those boundaries, which, it's difficult for me. And I know it's difficult for a lot of people. So that's my tip and trick.
I concur with everything that's been said. It'd be when I try and answer the second big giant question I saw in the chat.
Yes, thank you. I'm going to invite, and I apologize if I'm saying this wrong, Itala. I'm going to invite you to maybe ask your question. If not, I can always, oh, there you are. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here. Hi, everyone. So my question was, how do you climb, if you want, or how do you break those power structures even more when they are dominated by older men?
I mean, I'll just take a quick crack at that. That's a big question, complicated question, but I think what I've seen through the work that I described in Pleiades and what I've witnessed in the work that Planet Women does is it creates a kind of confidence where women own power in these spaces and really challenge the dynamics that are constantly around us. I know through this work, I can feel discomfort, but I can also feel equipped in those spaces, and then motivated to bring less white men into those spaces, really motivated to do that. So it's my quick answer to a big question.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I was just going to add that create tension, use your voice to create tension. And like Kathleen says, it can be uncomfortable, but it is very powerful to be in that space where you know something, you stand by that, and you speak up for yourself and create create good tension, not conflict or anything like that. It's just I know I stand by what I say. I'm standing by my perspective. I'm standing by my opinion, or I'm standing by this fact that I know. So I'm holding on to that, and I'm going to use my voice to speak about my perspective and my viewpoint, and that I think commands respect, and I think that's really important.
I just wanted to add to that. We had gone up against me and one of my council members. When I got out of tribal politics, I became a project manager that oversee a hazardous waste cleanup in a sacred site. And our motto was that how we did that and how we continue to do that to this day is one level at a time. And by gaining their respect, you create your own power. And so we were able to do that. And today, we're we still laugh about that sometimes, but at the same time, we were just like, well, we have to, get the message out. We have to get the need, addressed in that regard, but it had to come from that top level. So we had to, learn how to be respected from them, even though in that time it was mainly nothing but men and attorneys and people that were a lot higher than us that we never, but at the same time we said, no, we have spirit, we have our own power, we have the higher being, so I always go back to praying about it, in the work that we do, how we do it, setting that out daily, that's been my mainstay for me in addressing and getting up to those levels and those ranks, and then becoming colleagues, and that took a long time. And just in our world as women, that's how it's always been. Even in our tribal political realm, it's that way. It's always been men in some regards, but the ones that have been the ones that actually have done all the work or that do are the women in the tribe, in the indigenous communities that we have. So it's a balancing act, but like I said, I always just look at it as that, it's just kind of like a gingy. At one level at a time, you'll eventually get there, but it's doable.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. We are at time. So I want to take time to say thank you so much. And if you would like to support Planet Women, our projects, our leadership programs, you can join the Ripple. Kimberly will put a URL in the chat, and we'll also have a follow-up email with links to everything we talked about and how you can engage more with Planet Women. But for now, I'm going to pass it over to Janet to close us out.
Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody. I wanted to close our time together today with a message of hope. And I think Kimberly's going to share some photos. And the most hopeful person I've ever known was my father. My father was a journalist, and he came to America in 1972 to escape journalistic persecution in South Korea. Sorry. Although he continued to work as a journalist, writing for Korean newspapers in this country, he also worked over the years as a mechanic, a cleaner, and a computer operator, back in the days when a computer filled the entire room. After a year alone in this country, he brought his wife and 4 daughters to America to join him. We would face many challenges and uncertainty as undocumented immigrants, but he truly believed in the American dream, and more specifically, freedom of speech. Of course, he also knew that in a paternalistic culture that existed in Korea, that his 4 daughters would have limited opportunities to fulfill their dreams if we stayed there. Here we are at the airport leaving Seoul, Korea. We had quite a crowd of people to see us off since it was a big deal that we were leaving our family without knowing if we would ever see them again. My sisters and I are standing here with an aunt on the left, one of our aunts, our housekeeper, who was like a sister to us, and our family friend. From left to right is my third sister, Yu Gyung, my oldest sister, Mi Gyung, my second sister, Bo Gyung, and me, Cha Gyung. And we're all wearing name tags because we didn't speak a lick of English. So in case we get lost, we had name tags. When we arrived at our one-bedroom apartment in Arlington, Virginia, Kimberly, next slide. This is the note that my father had prepared for us. 어서 오너라, 우리 딸, 미경, 보경, 유경, and 자경. 이 넓고 좋은 땅에서 잘 참고 견디어. 사랑스러운 우리 딸이 되자, 아빠. And this translates to, welcome my daughters, 미경, 보경, 유경, and 자경. In this spacious and wonderful land, persist and endure and be the daughters I will be proud of. Daddy. Thank you so much for sharing this time with us in celebration of International Women's Day. I'm inspired by women every day, and I feel especially honored today. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a
Thank
good day.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you.
everyone. Beautiful job.